I froze the second I saw her face. 15 years had passed, but every curve, every flicker of recognition in those eyes was burned into my memory like a brand. "Mom, meet Terrence, my fiancé," Maya said, her voice bright with excitement as her hand found mine. My pulse hammered against my ribs. This was her. The woman who had consumed years of my youth, who I'd kept hidden like a shameful secret through college. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, eyes narrowing in what looked like confusion mixed with something darker. I forced my lips into a smile, pushing down the panic rising in my chest. Maya had absolutely no idea who her mother really was to me. The cafe buzzed with afternoon chatter around us, people oblivious to the earthquake happening at our small table. I extended my hand across the white tablecloth, feeling the weight of the moment. "Nice to meet you, ma'am. I'm Jayden Brooks," I said, the words coming out steadier than I felt inside. My mind was already racing backward through time. The late-night calls, the expensive gifts I couldn't afford to refuse, the impossible choices that had shaped who I became. I'd survived her once, clawed my way through those years with my dignity barely intact. And now fate had thrown us together again. Only this time her daughter sat between us, glowing with love and completely unaware. She lifted her coffee cup without meeting my eyes, pretending the past didn't exist between us. But I caught every tell. The way her fingers gripped the porcelain just a bit too tight, the slight hesitation before she spoke, the careful avoidance of direct eye contact. Maya talked enthusiastically about wedding venues, guest lists, color schemes. Each word she spoke felt like it was happening in another dimension while I stayed trapped in this silent standoff with her mother. I nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected, but inside I was that 20-year-old kid again, caught in circumstances beyond my control. Only now, everything had changed. Now I had something worth protecting. Walking home through the city streets, Maya's hand in mine, my thoughts spiraled into the past. Streetlights blurred as memories crashed over me. College nights when I was just trying to survive, trapped in a relationship that felt more like a transaction than anything real. She had been beautiful, powerful, demanding, and I had been young, broke, desperate for the opportunities her attention seemed to provide. The pressure of keeping that secret had left scars I rarely acknowledged, even to myself. Now, 15 years later, here she was again. The irony cut deep. I had escaped her control, rebuilt my life from nothing, and somehow ended up falling in love with her daughter. Maya and I had met 6 months ago at a company networking event. The connection was instant. Her laugh, the way she listened like my words actually mattered, her genuine kindness. We talked for hours that first night, sharing dreams and fears like old friends reuniting. She was different from anyone I'd ever met. When she'd invited me to meet her mother, I'd felt a flutter of nervousness, but nothing could have prepared me for this. As we walked, Maya squeezed my hand and smiled up at me. "She liked you. I could tell," she said. I managed a small laugh, but my mind was already working through scenarios, calculating risks, wondering how long I could keep this secret. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my past playing out like a movie I couldn't pause. Her mother had been 36 when we met, a successful real estate developer who'd come to speak at our college. I was 20, working 2 jobs to stay enrolled, exhausted and barely holding on. She'd noticed me, singled me out after her talk. What started as mentorship had twisted into something else entirely, something I didn't have the power or language to name back then. The gifts came first. Expensive dinners, a new laptop I desperately needed, help with tuition. Then came the expectations, the late-night calls, the secret meetings in hotel rooms across the city. I told myself it was consensual, that I was making a choice. But looking back now with 15 years of distance, I could see the power imbalance clearly. She'd held all the cards, money, connections, the ability to help or hurt my future. I'd been surviving, doing what I thought I had to do to make it through. The relationship lasted 2 years before she moved to another city for work and simply stopped calling. No goodbye, no closure, just silence. I'd graduated, thrown myself into my career, and slowly built a life I could be proud of. I thought I'd buried that chapter completely, until I saw her face across that cafe table and realized the past never really dies. The next few weeks were carefully choreographed tension. Maya's mother, Terrence, I had to remember to call her, invited us over for Sunday dinners. I went, playing the role of dutiful future son-in-law while watching her perform as the welcoming mother. We moved around each other like dancers who'd practiced this routine before, maintaining safe distances, speaking in careful pleasantries. I caught her watching me sometimes when Maya left the room, her expression unreadable. She never acknowledged our history, never gave any sign to Maya that we'd met before. I wondered if she was protecting her daughter or herself. Maybe both. The silence between us felt like a held breath, waiting for someone to finally exhale. Maya glowed with wedding plans. She'd show me fabric swatches and flower arrangements during lunch breaks, her enthusiasm infectious. I loved seeing her so happy, so sure of our future together. It made what I was hiding feel even heavier. Should I tell her? The question gnawed at me constantly. But how do you explain that you had a relationship with your fiancé's mother 15 years ago? How do you make someone understand the complicated mixture of survival, manipulation, and desperation that defined those years? I kept quiet, telling myself I was protecting her innocence. But deep down, I knew I was also protecting myself from losing her. Terrence finally broke first. She called my cell phone directly one afternoon. Maya must have given her my number. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, her voice carrying that same commanding tone from years ago. Alone. My stomach dropped, but I agreed. We met at a downtown hotel bar, neutral territory. She arrived in a tailored suit, looking every bit the successful businesswoman she'd become. I'd also risen in the world, no longer the struggling student she'd once known. That shift in power dynamics hung between us as we sat across from each other in a quiet corner booth. Neither of us ordered drinks. We just stared at each other, years of unspoken words filling the space. "You can't marry her," she said finally, her voice low and urgent. "You have to understand, Jayden. This is impossible." I felt anger flare in my chest, hot and sudden. "Why?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Because you're uncomfortable? Because it's awkward for you." She flinched slightly at my tone. "It's not right," she insisted. "Think about Maya. If she ever finds out." "Finds out what?" I interrupted. "That her mother had an inappropriate relationship with a college student? That you used your power and money to manipulate someone barely out of his teens?" The words hung between us, finally spoken aloud after all these years. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger or shame. I couldn't tell which. "I never forced you," she said defensively, but her voice wavered. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes directly for the first time since we'd sat down. "You didn't have to," I said quietly. "You offered things I desperately needed. You made me feel like I owed you. That's not force, but it's not freedom either." She looked away, jaw clenched. We sat in silence for several minutes. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost defeated. "What do you want from me?" she asked. I hadn't expected that question. What did I want? Revenge? An apology? Acknowledgement? I realized in that moment that what I wanted most was simply to move forward with Maya, without this shadow hanging over us. "I want you to accept this relationship," I said finally. "I love your daughter. Genuinely, purely, nothing like what you and I had. She makes me happy in ways I didn't know were possible. I'm not asking for your blessing, but I am asking you to let this be." Terrence studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression, recognition maybe, or resignation. "She can never know," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," I agreed. "She can never know. Not because I'm ashamed, but because it would hurt her for no reason. That part of my life, of our lives, is over. Let it stay buried." She nodded slowly, then stood to leave. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. "You're different now," she said. "Stronger." I didn't respond. She was right, but I didn't need her validation anymore. After that meeting, something shifted. Terrence became genuinely welcoming, or at least her performance became more convincing. She helped Maya pick out her wedding dress, hosted a bridal shower, acted like the loving mother of the bride. I watched it all with a mixture of relief and lingering unease. Maya noticed the change too. "I think Mom really likes you now," she said one evening, snuggled against me on the couch. "She was just being protective at first, but she sees how happy we are." I kissed the top of her head, grateful she'd never have to know the real reason for her mother's initial coldness. Some truths, I decided, weren't worth the damage they'd cause. The engagement party was held at a beautiful venue overlooking the river. Friends and family filled the space with laughter and celebration. I stood with Maya, her hand in mine, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in weeks. Terrence gave a toast, speaking about her daughter's joy and how proud she was to welcome me into the family. Her eyes met mine briefly across the room, and I saw something there. Not quite an apology, but perhaps an acknowledgement. We'd reached an unspoken truce. The past would stay buried. Maya would remain innocent and happy, and I could finally move forward without constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for everything to collapse. Wedding preparations consumed the next few months. Cake tastings, venue walkthroughs, guest list debates. Maya's enthusiasm was contagious, pulling me fully into the present. The shadow of the past began to fade, though it never disappeared entirely. Sometimes I'd catch Terrence watching me at family gatherings, and I'd see in her eyes what I felt too: relief that our secret held, gratitude that Maya's happiness remained untouched. We'd become unlikely allies, united by our shared love for the woman who connected us. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, and it certainly wasn't friendship, but it was something like peace, and that was enough. 2 weeks before the wedding, I had a moment of doubt. Maya and I were addressing invitations when she looked up with suddenly serious eyes. "Can I ask you something?" she said. My heart stopped. "Of course," I managed. "Do you have any secrets from me?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I thought about the truth, how it would shatter her world, destroy her relationship with her mother, possibly end our engagement. I thought about the young man I'd been, trapped and desperate. Then I looked at the woman I loved, who deserved honesty but also deserved peace. "Nothing that matters," I said finally. "Nothing that changes how much I love you." She smiled, satisfied, and went back to addressing envelopes. I breathed again. The wedding day arrived bright and clear. I stood at the altar watching Maya walk down the aisle, her face radiant behind the veil. Terrence walked beside her, both of them smiling. In that moment, looking at the two women who'd shaped my life in such different ways, I felt the weight of history finally lift. This wasn't about the past anymore. This was about the future Maya and I would build together. Honest, loving, free from the shadows that had haunted me for so long. As Maya reached the altar and took my hands, I saw Terrence dab at her eyes in the front row. Whether those were tears of joy or something more complicated, I'd never know. And I realized I didn't need to. "I do," Maya said, her voice clear and certain. "I do." I echoed, meaning it with everything I had. The officiant pronounced us married, and Maya threw her arms around my neck, laughing with pure joy. The reception was a blur of dancing, toasts, and celebration. At one point, Terrence approached me at the bar while Maya was dancing with her friends. "Thank you," she said quietly, so only I could hear. "For what?" I asked. "For loving her the right way," she replied. "For being the man she deserves." I nodded, accepting what passed for an apology between us. "She is loved," I confirmed. "Always will be." We stood together in comfortable silence, watching Maya laugh and spin on the dance floor. The honeymoon took us to Italy, 2 weeks of wine, pasta, and finally being able to breathe without the weight of secrets. Maya and I explored ancient streets, got lost in art museums, stayed up late talking about our dreams for the future. Children, careers, the life we'd build together. I told her stories from my childhood, my struggles in college, how hard I'd worked to become the man I was now. She listened with loving attention, proud of what I'd overcome. I didn't mention Terrence, of course. That chapter remained closed, a book neither of us needed to reopen. By the time we returned home, I felt truly free for the first time since seeing her mother's face that day in the cafe. 6 months into marriage, Maya announced she was pregnant. The joy on her face was everything. We told Terrence together over dinner, and I watched her reaction carefully. She cried, genuine tears this time, and hugged Maya tight. "You're going to be an amazing mother," she said. Then, surprisingly, she looked at me. "And you'll be a wonderful father." I thanked her, and meant it. Whatever complicated history lay between us, we'd both chosen to protect Maya's happiness. In that moment, I realized we'd succeeded. The past hadn't destroyed the present. Instead, it had taught me to value and protect the genuine love I'd found. I'd survived, learned, and somehow landed exactly where I needed to be. Our daughter was born on a spring morning, tiny and perfect. Maya held her with tears streaming down her face while I stood beside them, overwhelmed with emotion. Terrence arrived at the hospital an hour later, bringing flowers and gifts. She held her granddaughter gently, her face soft with love. "She's beautiful," she whispered, "just like her mother." As I watched 3 generations together in that hospital room, I felt the final piece of my past click into place. I'd turned pain into purpose, survival into strength, and somehow built a family from the ashes of who I'd once been. The scared college kid was gone. In his place stood a husband, a father, a man who'd earned his peace. Years passed. Our daughter grew, brought joy and chaos into our lives. Maya thrived as a mother, and I discovered depths of love I hadn't known existed. Terrence became a devoted grandmother, present but respectful of boundaries. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with something like gratitude, and I'd nod back with understanding. We'd become family in the truest sense, not through blood or history, but through shared love for Maya and our daughter. The secret we carried grew lighter with time, less like a burden and more like simply another part of the complex story of how families form and heal and move forward together. One evening, years after everything began, Terrence and I found ourselves alone on the patio during a family barbecue. Maya was inside with our daughter, their laughter floating through the open door. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly, quietly. "Marrying her, knowing what you knew?" I thought about the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "I regret what happened between us. I regret being put in that position. But Maya? Our life together? Never." She nodded slowly. "I was wrong," she said, the words clearly difficult. "Back then, I was selfish and cruel, and I justified it to myself. I'm sorry. It was the apology I'd never expected." "Thank you," I said simply. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The past doesn't disappear. It becomes part of who we are, shapes us in ways we don't always recognize. I learned that survival sometimes means making impossible choices, and that strength comes from turning those choices into wisdom rather than letting them define us. Maya never learned about her mother and me. That secret stayed buried where it belonged. But she benefited from it anyway, from the man I'd become through surviving it, from the depth of love I could offer because I knew what love wasn't. Standing on that patio watching my family through the window, I finally made complete peace with my story. All of it. The pain, the growth, the unexpected redemption. I had survived. I had loved. I had built something real and lasting. That was enough.